Welcome back to another snorkeling adventure. Today, we have 3 objectives. 1, journey to the spring. 2, film giant tadpoles. And 3, film giant tadpoles up close. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The spring is pretty remote, so it's about a 2-mile trip upriver. Since we're going upriver against the current, I am bringing the trolling motor. Call me lazy, call me resourceful. Yes, that is true. We're rocking and rolling. It's pretty foggy this morning. If you're looking around and you think this landscape looks really kind of bizarre, that's because it is. A long time ago, they thought it was a good idea to try and build a cross-Florida canal, which is obviously a horrible idea ecologically, and thankfully they never completed it. They did install a dam and flooded out this river section. So all the surroundings around me would have been underwater, but they do drawdowns periodically and the water returns to its normal level. And there's some conservation efforts to restore this whole river system to what it used to be naturally. Differing opinions, of course. It's Florida, so there's always differing opinions on what to do with the natural environment. But I love to see a dam go. Maybe it's because I watched a ton of Lord of the Rings as a kid. Have Treebeard yelling, "Break the dam, release the rivers," burned into my brain. There's some wildlife connectivity issues with the dam, and even though it'd be a lot of work to restore this area, I think it'd be worth it. Anyways, that's why you can see all this kind of strange flatland around the river, and you can see some emergent vegetation on the tops of the berms surrounding here. And even if you look over here, there's a tiny waterfall over there, which that's not normal for Florida. But the reason that's there is because some of the water was trapped in some of those higher pools and is just draining down the lower section of the river. Ultimately, what's really interesting is the spring that we're headed to. Even though it's really small, it's normally totally drowned out by the river when the dam is working. But today, the river's low, the spring is visible. So that means we can go and snorkel with some tadpoles. I'm gonna send the drone up, but since it's foggy, I'm gonna stay below the tree line, just for safety. You can kind of see the water line on some of the trees and the cypress knees. When the dam is up, this is all underwater, and it looks like it's about 6 feet above where it's at right now. So pretty big difference. We've made it to the spring run, and as you can see, the water is crystal clear. So super shallow though, so we're gonna be paddling the rest of the way. There it is. It is tiny, but I did see one tadpole. Hopefully get lucky, find some more underwater, but it's time to suit up. Florida's doing that weird thing in January where it randomly gets warm, so I brought the wetsuit top. That's really all we need today. It's definitely much easier when I just have to get the top on. That's rad. Got a different mask today. Believe it or not, I lost my other one, so using my wife's today. Thank you, Sarah. There's a lot of fish there, but gotta see if we can find these tadpoles. Someone must have told the welcoming committee I was on the way, because that's a lot of sunfish right off the rip. Despite its small size, this blue hole was bustling with red breast and bluegill sunfish. As for the spring itself, what it lacked in vegetation, it certainly made up for in topography. Now, to fully appreciate this aquatic ecosystem, you've got to see it from the perspective of a little fish. Suddenly, ordinary piles of sugar sand are transformed into an impressive ridgeline of snow-capped peaks. But instead of airplanes, the blue sky is filled with fish, soaring over their own aquatic version of the Rockies on this winter's day. The water was crystal clear, in classic Florida Springs fashion, but in certain areas there was a lot of debris flying around in the water column. The closer I got to the bottom of the spring, the more intense the storm of organic matter became. Where the spring water bubbled up from deep underground, an underwater pool of sand and tiny bits of wood and leaves was swirling about. If we're still running with the underwater mountain metaphor, then I suppose this adds a volcanic component to those mountains. However, instead of underlying magma, it's blue water spilling upwards and out, using the sand and debris to form its own gaseous plume. Some of the spring boils were so forceful and so full of sand that they actually looked like geysers, erupting from the miniature valleys, like some alternate reality fish version of Yellowstone National Park. Pretty easy to lose track of time when you're staring at a spring boil. But remember, I'm on a mission, a giant tadpole mission. So I began to look a little more closely at the area surrounding the spring boils. And then, off to the side, beneath a small limestone shelf, I noticed a tiny blob covered in a fresh dusting of sand. I dove down for a closer look, and lo and behold, I found them, the giant tadpoles. They were up to absolutely nothing, but it didn't matter. They were enormous, with beady red eyes all stacked together below the tiny cliff. It looked like they were huddling together in a snowstorm. These are river frog tadpoles. It might sound like I'm just calling them that because they are, or at least will be, frogs and live by a river, but river frog is their actual common name, Lithobates hexeri, if Latin is your thing, and I'm not entirely positive if I pronounced that correctly. Then, suddenly, with a stroke of luck, we got some action. One of the tadpoles slowly swam up along the edge of the limestone shelf, grazing on bits of algae along the rock. Now, I think that a lot of us tend to accept tadpoles as a very normal part of the natural world, but when you get a good look at a supersized one, you quickly realize they are anything but normal. Gotta be one of the most bizarre-looking, bulbous, chicken-legged creatures I've ever seen. But this weirdo is destined for greatness. On the other side of metamorphosis, the high calling of being a frog awaits. Surpassed in size only by bullfrog tadpoles, these are still some of the largest tadpoles in the US. The biggest of these fine fellows was very close to 6 inches, and I carefully put my hand out next to them for reference. I found another huddle of tadpoles tucked up beneath a log. They weren't interested in leaving their hideout, however, so I let them be. I then turned my attention to the rest of the spring and the surrounding area. I wasn't originally planning to explore this part, but my curiosity got the better of me, so I headed off. Thank goodness I saw this lake chubsucker. It looked like he was in the middle of morphing from the yellow juvenile coloration to the darker version of the breeding adults, so that's pretty cool. In the distance, I also spotted a chain pickerel. These predators are beautiful fish and are closely related to pike and muskie, but they're also pretty shy, and it kept its distance from me and my camera. I was doing my best to swim as shallow as possible, but even my subtle movements were still stirring up a cloud of organic silt behind me. Now, this is going to be important later. I think all of this muck wouldn't be here if the spring wasn't typically drowned out by the dammed river, but that's the way it was today. I pressed on to a deeper area that seemed to be promisingly full of fish. As I made my way to the far side of the pool, the water became murkier, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the silt cloud I had generated swimming here would overtake me. Even some of the fish were leaving behind their own clouds of underwater dust. As I neared the far shoreline, I saw a snag of dead trees in the distance. Sure enough, a large gathering of a variety of fish had amassed in the area. There were so many fish that I was kind of overwhelmed and didn't really know what to focus on. There are even some species I hadn't seen before. Now, if you have a good eye, you'll probably spy something I completely failed to notice, but give me a second and I will recognize it eventually. The gathering of fish was made up of bluegill sunfish, spotted sunfish, warmouths, a few crappie, and invasive brown hoplo, a type of armored catfish. I was still struggling to decide which fish to focus on when I turned and realized my silk cloud had finally caught up to me, and I was about to lose all visibility. The next instant, I noticed a spiky-looking tail and immediately realized this whole time I was directly beside a 6-foot alligator. Normally, I like to know where alligators are before they see me. That did not happen today. I looked him dead on in the pale blue of his nictitating membrane before a wall of fish and debris washed over me and everything went brown. I then immediately put it in reverse and waded backwards out of the stream through waist-deep muck up and onto shore. Well, how about that? 2 lessons learned for that. 1, in Florida, any body of water, no matter how small, there could always be an alligator there. So gotta check your surroundings. I wasn't originally planning to go to the far side where he was. I just did, and then there he was. Just expect them to be wherever there's water, because it's their home. But 2, wild alligators that aren't accustomed to people and haven't been fed really want nothing to do with you. That guy knew I was there the entire time, way before I even got to him, and he just wanted to be left alone. But yeah, this is their home. Gotta respect it. Well, it is kind of raining. We're trying to avoid the water droplets and switch to my macro lens. And yes, I did get in a little bit of mud. All right, I didn't film it because it was raining. It's a little stressful, but I did get the macro lens on, so I'm gonna get a few shots of the tadpoles and then head out. It's macro tadpole time. Back in again to see the tadpoles one last time. The water column of the spring was still swirling with its own version of snow and ash as the relentless boil churned furiously down below. It was still full of fish. Gotta love the neon colors on those red-breast sunfish. And of course, the river frog tadpoles hadn't gone anywhere either. It's been a long time since I've really looked at a tadpole up close, and despite my shaky macro lens, their cosmically speckled skin was pretty spectacular to look at. Also, man, what a face. I love it. Other than the large size, there's a couple ways to tell river frog tadpoles apart from other tadpoles. For one, as I mentioned earlier, their skin looks like it's been sprinkled all over with tiny flecks of gold. But the best giveaway is the dark outline running around the edge of their tail. River frogs are native to the coastal plains of the southeastern U.S. They're actually pretty abundant in the southern portion of their range, but habitat destruction has caused them to begin disappearing from northern and eastern parts. They're actually considered extinct in North Carolina, as they haven't been spotted there since 1975. If they're lucky, these tadpoles, or pollywogs, or whatever you want to call them, will stay in this form for 2 winters before mighty morphin into their final adult form. It's crazy to think that little chicken leg will one day be powerful enough to propel a full-blown frog over 4 feet through the air. I think I have a better understanding now of why these weird and not so little tadpoles so successfully captured my imagination as a kid, and I think I gotta keep that alive. Alrighty. Well, everything is wet. I'm pretty cold. Nevertheless, we did accomplish our 3 objectives. We journeyed to the spring, we filmed giant tadpoles, and we did film giant tadpoles up close. We're zooming now. Much easier going with the current than against it. It's really windy out here and my canoe keeps getting blown in circles. All right. In conclusion, if you want to film tadpoles in Florida, there's a lot of work and also potentially hazardous. Thank you guys for coming along on this journey. You know what they say, tiny spring, big adventure. Anyways, I'll see you later.